Picture this.
The London Stock Exchange, 1815. The air is thick with sweat, cigar smoke, and fear. Men in frock coats shout over each other as the price of British government bonds flickers and falls. In the middle of the chaos, one man barely moves. He leans, almost lazily, against a stone pillar that everyone simply calls the Rothschild pillar. His hands are buried deep in his pockets. His eyes look dull, dead, almost. Then a whisper starts to spread. Rothschild is selling. Within minutes, panic erupts. Traders dump their bonds. Prices crash. Everyone thinks they know what it means. Rothschild knows Waterloo is lost. Britain is finished. And then, according to the legend, at the very last second, Nathan Mayer Rothschild buys everything back for pennies. By the time news breaks that Wellington has actually defeated Napoleon, Nathan has supposedly made the greatest fortune in financial history. All because he knew before everyone else. All because he secretly backed both sides of the war. It's a gripping story. It's also almost entirely wrong. Now, imagine rewinding that scene. The shouting fades, the smoke clears, the legend dissolves. We're left with one question. If that's not how Nathan made his power, then how did he really do it? Because behind that myth lies a stranger, darker, and far more important truth. Nathan Mayer Rothschild did not get rich by rigging one day's trading. He built something much bigger, a private financial network that could move money faster than any government, pierce Napoleon's Continental blockade, and decide whether armies got paid or starved. He didn't fund both sides of the Napoleonic Wars. He cracked the system that both sides depended on. So who was this man really? And why has his story been twisted for nearly 200 years into one of the most persistent conspiracy theories on Earth? Start in Frankfurt, late 18th century. Narrow streets, leaning houses. Inside one cramped building in the Judengasse, a man sits at a small desk, surrounded by coins. Old ducats, rare medals, ancient gold. Mayer Amschel Rothschild isn't a baron yet. He's a coin dealer and financial agent for Wilhelm, Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel, one of the richest men in Europe. When Napoleon's armies threaten Germany, Wilhelm's fortune needs to be hidden and moved. Mayer becomes the guardian of that capital, and suddenly the little coin shop in the Ghetto is handling princely sums. Now picture him at that cluttered table late at night. 5 boys around him: Amschel, Salomon, Nathan, Carl, and James. He isn't just teaching them the value of a coin, he's outlining a plan. Frankfurt, Vienna, London, Naples, Paris. 5 brothers, 5 cities, 1 partnership. Mayer's idea is blunt and brilliant. Scatter the family across Europe, but bind them with a single contract. Share information, share profits, share risks. A private nervous system running beneath the map of Europe. One of those nerve endings is the third son, Nathan. In 1798, at 21, Nathan leaves the Ghetto behind. He arrives in Manchester, the roar of the Industrial Revolution all around him. Looms clatter, chimneys belch smoke, cotton dust hangs in the air. Most merchants buy textiles through middlemen and wait for payment. Nathan does it differently. He goes straight to the mills, pays cash, ships quickly. He flips cloth at thin margins but high volume, pushing his turnover faster than rivals. And he uses family connections, like the wealthy Cohen relatives, to plug into Amsterdam, Hamburg, and beyond. he learns two things that will define his life. Speed is power, and relationships are currency. His reputation, though, is mixed. Others see him as sharp, even shoddy in his practices. For a while, he has to rely on the Cohen's paper instead of his own, because their bills are trusted and his are not. That stings, and it teaches him just how fragile trust can be. By 1804, Manchester feels too small. Nathan moves to London and sets up at New Court in St. Swithin's Lane, in the heart of the city. He starts dealing in bills of exchange, paper IOUs that move money across borders, and speculating in government securities. He joins circles usually closed to Ashkenazi Jews, even slipping into Freemasonry, searching for every edge in an elite world that still sees him as an outsider. Then, in 1809, he steps into the business that will change everything. Gold. Picture heavy chests opened under candlelight, scales balancing, the clink of guineas, Spanish silver dollars, French louis d'or. Nathan begins to deal in bullion, buying and selling gold and silver across Europe. And just as he does it, the continent catches fire. Napoleon dominates mainland Europe. His Continental system aims to strangle Britain's trade. Ports from the Baltic to the Mediterranean are ordered to shut out British goods. British ships are barred from European harbours. Across the Channel, Britain fights back the only way it can, with its navy and with money. London pays vast subsidies to Prussia, Austria, Russia, anyone willing to field armies against France. And in the Iberian Peninsula, the Duke of Wellington is slogging through Portugal and Spain, trying to pry Napoleon's forces off the map. But there's a problem that no general can solve. Wellington's army is rich on paper and starving in reality. London can issue all the paper promises it wants. Local merchants, peasants, and allies don't want British notes. They don't trust bits of engraved paper from a far-off island. They want specie, gold and silver coins, hard money you can bite. Meanwhile, the Bank of England, under pressure, has already suspended gold convertibility. Its reserves are strained. Moving coin across battlefields and blockades is dangerous and expensive. In London, one official is caught in the middle of this nightmare. John Charles Herries, Commissary-in-Chief. His job is simple to describe and almost impossible to do. Get money to the army. He turns to the big names, Baring Brothers, Hope & Co., and finds that even they hesitate to push massive amounts of bullion through Napoleon's Europe. So he looks around the city for someone who actually moves gold already, someone comfortable in the grey zone between legal trade and smuggling. This is where Nathan walks in. By 1811, Nathan's bullion operations have become aggressive, even risky. He buys gold and silver in London, ships it out where prices are higher, fights and bargains for every point on the exchange. He's built a network of brokers, carriers, and secret routes that ignore neat lines on the map. He looks to Herries like the one person crazy enough and skilled enough to feed Wellington's insatiable need for coin. The British government starts talking to Nathan in secret. Can he do what no official channel can? Can he send actual money through enemy territory? January 11th, 1814. It's just a line in a dusty file at the British Treasury. But this contract changes financial history. On that day, Nathan Mayer Rothschild agrees with Herries to provide up to £600,000 in French gold and silver coin for Wellington's army, for a 2% commission. It sounds straightforward. It isn't. To fulfill this deal, Nathan has to do something close to impossible: collect French and Spanish coin deep inside Napoleon's system and deliver it safely to Britain's greatest general. He doesn't do it alone. He calls in the family network. Cut to Paris, 1812. A young man steps down from a coach. Dark hair, quick eyes. This is James Mayer Rothschild, the youngest brother. Paris is Napoleon's capital, the beating heart of the French Empire's financial system, and Nathan places his brother right in the middle of it. James does not walk into the Tuileries and hand Napoleon a loan. He does something subtler. He uses the French market to bleed it. He buys French louis d'or quietly in Paris. He gathers Spanish and Mexican silver wherever French influence reaches. He works through a web of Jewish and non-Jewish traders, brokers, and smugglers. Across Europe, other Rothschild agents in Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and northern ports are doing the same. Buying coin in small lots, spreading out purchases so they don't spike prices or draw attention. Rothschild letters fly back and forth. Don't buy too much in one place. Don't push prices up. Keep it quiet. Now shift the camera to the coast of northern France at dawn. Dunkirk. Grave lines. A cold wind off the channel. Low grey waves slapping against the shore. Napoleon's economic war has turned this coastline into something strange. A city of smugglers. Warehouses full of contraband. Up to 300 English smugglers housed in a special compound. Boats slipping in and out of little harbours under cover of fog. Their cargo? Gold guineas and English notes heading one way. Brandy, textiles, news. And French coin heading the other. Here's the twist. Napoleon encourages part of this trade. He believes that if French merchants can vacuum up British gold, they'll drain the Bank of England's reserves. In his mind, whoever hoards more metal wins. Paper credit is flimsy, bullion is real. But the Rothschilds flip that logic. They use the same smuggling routes to move coin not just into France, but out again, into the pay chests of Wellington's army in Spain and southern France. British gold flows into French hands. French gold flows out to British armies. And somewhere in that loop, the Rothschilds skim a small but steady commission. So while Napoleon thinks he's weakening Britain by sucking in guineas, Nathan is quietly turning his empire's gold into Britain's weapon. Think of it as 19th century financial judo. And remember this: they're doing it in a world with no telegraphs, no phones, no airplanes. So how do they keep it all coordinated? Now zoom out to the Rothschild communications network. Most governments are still relying on clumsy official couriers. Messages crawl along muddy roads, tossed on decks of slow packet boats. The Rothschilds build their own system. Dedicated shipping agents in Dover, Calais, Ostend. Fast, shallow draft cutters waiting at anchor, ready to sail at a moment's notice. On land, relay horses and trusted riders linking ports to offices in London, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Paris. When a Rothschild agent has news, he doesn't queue at a government post office. He hands it to a private courier whose only job is to move that one message as fast as possible. Later, the family will add carrier pigeons to this mix, tiny, feathered messengers streaking across the sky, each carrying a scrap of coded paper. But during the Napoleonic Wars, the real edge is human organization. Information moves through this private nerve network faster than through any official channel, and money follows that information. So far, Nathan's power has come from war and smuggling. But now, on a muddy field in Belgium, something happens that will tempt storytellers for centuries. June 18, 1815. The field of Waterloo. We know the images: mud, smoke, the thunder of cannon, squares of red-coated infantry holding against desperate cavalry charges. At the end of a long, bloody day, Napoleon's army breaks. The Allies win. The legend says Nathan is there in person, watching from a hill. As soon as he sees Napoleon defeated, he mounts a horse, races to the channel, bribes a fisherman to row him across in a storm, then gallops to London. There, he strides into the stock exchange, looks grim, starts quietly selling British government bonds. Other traders see this and panic. Rothschild knows, we've lost. Prices crash. At the last second, Nathan swoops in and buys everything back for a pittance. When official news of victory finally arrives, the market explodes upward, and he walks away with a fortune made on everyone else's fear. You've probably seen some version of this in memes, novels, or conspiracy videos. But here's the problem. None of it stands up when you follow the money, or the archives. Here's what actually happens. Nathan is in London, not on the battlefield. A Rothschild agent, John Roworth, stationed near Ghent, learns of the victory on June 19th. He rides hard to the coast, crosses the Channel, and reaches London on June 20th. He goes straight to New Court. Picture Roworth, coated in dust, standing in front of Nathan's desk, delivering the news in a few clipped sentences. Napoleon is defeated. Wellington has won. Nathan doesn't sprint straight to the exchange to trick anyone. He goes to the government. In Whitehall, ministers are already jittery. They've heard about the earlier clash at Quatre Bras and fear bad news. Nathan appears and says his courier brings word. It's over. Napoleon has lost. Officials are skeptical. Their own messenger, Major Henry Percy, won't arrive with Wellington's official dispatch until the evening of June 21st. But by then, victory is undeniable. And for Nathan, that presents a problem no legend ever mentions. He has spent years gearing his business around a long war. Long war means long contracts, bullion transfers, exchange deals, commissions on subsidies to allies. Peace threatens to shut off that stream almost overnight. Historians like Neil Ferguson and Brian Cathcart have gone back to the bond price data around these days. They don't see a massive engineered crash followed by some epic Rothschild buy-in. There is no smoking gun of a one-day, world-shattering coup. Any gains Nathan might have made from moving slightly faster on the news were likely offset by the sudden collapse of his incredibly lucrative war business. So where did that dramatic story come from? To answer that, we have to jump 30 years forward and cross back to Paris. Mid-1840s. France is under a constitutional monarchy. Railways are spreading like veins across the countryside. One day, there's a terrible accident on a line controlled by James de Rothschild. Public anger bubbles up. Into this moment steps a pamphleteer named Georges D'Ernevale. He writes under the pen name Satan. D'Ernevale publishes a vicious little book with a long title, Edifying and Curious History of Rothschild I, King of the Jews. In it, he takes whispers and resentments about the Rothschilds and forges them into a weapon. He puts Nathan on the battlefield at Waterloo. He invents the stormy Channel crossing and the bribed fisherman. He amplifies the market panic and claims Nathan made 20 million francs in a single, carefully engineered trick. It's not a sober history, it's a political hit job, and it becomes the birthplace of the modern Rothschild conspiracy narrative. D'Anville's pamphlet isn't just anti-capitalist, it's explicitly anti-Jewish. It paints the Rothschilds as parasitic, rootless manipulators, men who feed on war, national suffering, and the blood of ordinary French soldiers. It turns a real, complicated story of cross-border finance into a simple fable of Jewish greed. Victorian magazines pick it up and embroider it. Biography writers repeat it without checking sources. A 1934 Hollywood film, The House of Rothschild, dramatizes it for audiences worldwide. By the time the internet arrives, the tale has been sanded down into a neat, shareable accusation. The Rothschilds funded both sides of the Napoleonic Wars and rigged Waterloo. The myth spreads faster than any archival correction ever will, and because it was born in anti-Semitic propaganda, it plugs easily into today's darkest corners online. So what actually sits behind the myth when you strip away the hate and the drama? What did Nathan really fund? And why is the truth, in some ways, more unsettling than the conspiracy? Look at the surviving contracts, letters, and treasury records. Nathan's work during the Napoleonic era is overwhelmingly on one side: Britain and her allies. He channels British subsidies to Austria, Prussia, Russia. He finances Wellington's campaigns. He arranges enormous sums to support Britain's coalition partners after Napoleon's Russian disaster. His brother Salomon later distributes English subsidies from Vienna. James operates in Paris to buy gold that ultimately flows to British needs, not French ones. They are deep inside Napoleon's economic system, but they are there to siphon his resources, not to secure his throne. The Rothschilds don't fund both sides like some neutral casino. They build a transnational machine that governments on one side of the conflict become addicted to. And when the cannons fall silent, that machine doesn't shut down. It levels up. Now fast forward to 1818. Europe is at peace, but heavily in debt. Old monarchies have been restored, borders redrawn, but treasuries are empty. States need cash, fast, to refinance war debts, to stabilize currencies, to build roads, ports, and increasingly, railways. Nathan sees an opening. He arranges a £5 million loan for the Prussian government. Here's the breakthrough. The loan is raised in London, in sterling. Prussian bonds are sold to investors across Europe.
Interest is paid through London's markets.
Nathan has helped invent something new, the truly international, private primary market for government debt. Within a few years, similar deals cascade. Salomon in Vienna orchestrates a giant Austrian lottery loan to rescue the imperial treasury. Karl in Naples helps manage a stabilization loan there and stays to found a permanent branch. In 1824, Nathan leads a big issue for the Empire of Brazil, plugging a new South American state into European capital. If you own government bonds in your retirement account today, you're living in the world Nathan helped build. By mid-century, commentators talk about Europe having not just 5 great powers, Britain, France, Austria, Prussia, Russia, but a 6th, the House of Rothschild. They don't rule territory, they rule credit. So far, Nathan has made his name on war and reconstruction. But his most dramatic peacetime moment comes from a different kind of battlefield, a financial one. London, 1825. The city is buzzing with speculation. Investors have piled into Latin American bonds and exotic new ventures. Stories of silver mountains and Andean riches float through coffee houses. Then, reality bites. The bubble bursts. Confidence evaporates. Banks start to fail. People rush to convert banknotes into gold. At the center of the storm sits the Bank of England. Under the rules of the time, every note the bank issues is supposed to be convertible into gold coin on demand. But in the rush, gold is pouring out faster than it's coming in. Day by day, the bank's reserves dwindle. Behind closed doors, officials stare at their balance sheets and see the unthinkable. If the gold runs out, the Bank of England, symbol of British stability, might have to default on its promises. That would shatter faith in the currency, shatter faith in the government, trigger a full-blown economic collapse. Unless someone can get them a lot of specie very quickly. That someone is Nathan. Drawing on the family's international operations, he scrapes gold together from across Europe. He taps contacts in Paris, Frankfurt, maybe even drains reserves intended for other purposes. Wagons loaded with coin roll into Threadneedle Street just as the bank is on the brink. The notes keep being honored. The panic slowly ebbs. Out on the street, most people never know how close they came to disaster. But inside the small circle that understands, the message is crystal clear. A private banker has just bailed out the central bank of the world's greatest empire. What does that actually mean? It means a man once locked behind Ghetto gates now holds enough liquid power to stop Britain's financial heart from failing. When his rivals at Barings say that in money and funds he is what Bonaparte was in war, they aren't being poetic. They're describing a new kind of sovereignty. By the time Nathan dies in 1836, his personal fortune amounts to about 0.62% of Britain's entire national income. Try to imagine an individual today personally owning that slice of a major economy. The poet Heinrich Heine looks at this and writes bitterly that money is the god of our time and Rothschild is his prophet. He lists Nathan alongside Richelieu and Robespierre as men who destroyed the old aristocracy, only this time beheading is replaced by bonds. But power like this doesn't come clean, and Nathan's story has its own deep moral shadows. In the 1830s, Britain finally abolishes slavery in its empire, but it doesn't do it by simply declaring the enslaved free and walking away. The British state chooses to compensate the slave owners for their loss of property. To do that, it borrows an enormous sum, £15 million. In today's money, that's well over £1 billion. Who organizes that loan? Nathan Mayer Rothschild and his brother-in-law, Moses Montefiore. The debt is so large that it lingers on the British books through refinancings and restructurings until 2015. And when historians dig into the compensation records at University College London, they find Nathan's name again. Not just as a lender, but as a beneficiary. As a mortgage holder on a plantation in Antigua, he receives about £2,571 in compensation when 158 enslaved people there are freed. The same financial network that can get gold to Wellington, that can rescue the Bank of England, also softens the blow of abolition for slave owners. The same system that props up governments and funds railways is entangled with human bondage. So, when we talk about Nathan as a founding architect of modern capitalism, this is part of the foundation too. After Nathan's death, the machine keeps adapting. Salomon in Vienna funds the Nordbahn, Austria's first steam railway, and buys ironworks to feed it with steel. James in France backs the chemin de fer du Nord, threading rails from Paris to Belgium and the Channel. Later in the 19th century, the family helps finance enormous mining ventures: the Rio Tinto copper mines in Spain, De Beers diamonds in South Africa. In 1835, just before his death, Nathan secures control over Spain's Almaden mercury mines, effectively seizing a European monopoly on mercury, crucial for refining gold and silver. They move from government bonds into the skeleton and bloodstream of industrialization: rails, mines, metals, insurance. In 1824, Nathan and his brother-in-law Moses Montefiore also found the Alliance Assurance Company, one of the ancestors of modern giants like Royal and Son Alliance. The instruments change: coins, bills, bonds, stocks, insurance policies, but the underlying power remains the same. Control the flow of value, move it faster and more reliably than anyone else, and you shape what states and societies can do. So why does the conspiracy version of Nathan's story feel so stubbornly attractive? Why do people still reach for the image of the lone puppet master, the banker in the shadows, instead of the more complicated reality? Because in some ways, the myth is easier to swallow than the truth. The myth says there's a single villain, a family that funds both sides, rigs every outcome, and secretly runs everything. If that were true, then fixing the world would be as simple as knocking down that one family. The reality that Nathan's life points to is far more uncomfortable. He wasn't omnipotent. He was a migrant entrepreneur who figured out, earlier than almost anyone, a brutal rule of the modern age. Whoever can move information and value faster than the state and across more borders than the state gains leverage over the state. His couriers outran official messengers. His gold arrived where government money couldn't. His bond issues tied distant investors and cabinets into a shared web of obligation. That's not magic. It's engineering of networks, of trust, of time. And if that sounds abstract, think about today. High-frequency trading firms spend fortunes shaving microseconds off cable routes so their algorithms can trade fractions of a second faster. Global payment platforms can move money across borders in ways that regulators struggle to track. Tech giants control the pipelines through which news, rumors, and narratives flow. Whoever builds the fastest, most reliable network for moving information and value gets to set the tempo. Governments follow. Nathan's world was slower, dirtier, more physical. Couriers on horseback instead of fiber optic cables. Smuggler skiffs instead of encrypted apps. But the underlying logic is the same. And when people feel that logic bearing down on them, when they sense that giant impersonal systems are shaping their lives, there's a powerful temptation. Not to study the system, but to invent monsters. In the 1840s, that monster was Rothschild, King of the Jews. Today, it morphs into vague talk of globalists, bankers, or shadowy elites pulling every string, a language that often recycles the same old prejudices with new packaging. It's easier to blame a villain than to ask a harder question. How did we build a world where private networks of credit and information can outweigh democratic choices? Nathan Mayer Rothschild doesn't give us that answer, but his life forces us to confront the question. So picture him one last time, in the crowded London Stock Exchange, leaning against his pillar, hands in his pockets, eyes seemingly blank. A man from a Frankfurt ghetto whose family couldn't own land, now able to rescue the Bank of England. A banker who helps defeat Napoleon, only to help compensate slave owners a few years later. A figure who never funded both sides of the Napoleonic Wars, but helped create a side of the game above both sides, the sovereign realm of credit. His story isn't about a secret emperor of Europe, it's about a shift in where power lives, from land to paper, from thrones to ledgers, from the battlefield to the balance sheet. And in that new world, the true sovereign is not the king who commands armies, it's the one who commands credit.